They called me many things over the years. A spoiled heir, a trust fund brat, a playboy who never worked a real day in his life. I heard those labels whisper behind glasses of expensive wine, murmured in boardrooms I was never invited into, typed under headlines that pretended to know everything about me. I never corrected them, never bothered explaining who I really was, because for most of my life, it didn't matter. The world only saw what it wanted to see: a man who flirted too much, partied too late, dressed too well, and cared too little. And maybe that used to be true. But things change when life hands you someone who makes you want to grow up. Someone who looks at the wreck you are and still believes there's a heart worth keeping. For me, that person was my wife, Isla, the CEO who built an empire before turning 30, the woman the world admired long before she ever knew I existed. I still remember the first time I saw her step out her glass office, her heels echoing like authority across the marble floor, her voice slicing through negotiations with the precision of someone who had shaped her own destiny with bare, bleeding hands. People feared disappointing her, not because she was cruel, but because she was brilliant. She was the kind of woman who walked like she carried galaxies on her shoulders. And yet when she looked at me that day, for a split second her eyes softened, as though she was tired of being the storm everyone demanded her to be. I didn't know then that this moment, this brief flicker of vulnerability, would become the compass of my life. Our marriage shocked everyone. Her inner circle whispered that she married too quickly. Mine insisted I was punching way above my league. The media treated it as entertainment. A CEO marrying a man with a reputation made of parties and neon lights. But Isla saw something else in me, something even I had buried under years of noise and meaningless nights. She once told me, "People mistake loudness for identity. Yours is quiet but real." And for the first time, I believed that maybe she was right. So yes, I changed. Not because she asked me to, but because loving her made me want to become a man worth her trust. But the world doesn't like balance. It doesn't like when someone powerful stands on steady feet. And so the storm arrived, quietly at first, like all disasters do. A lawsuit here, an investor backing out there, a rumor planted at the perfect time, a board that pretended to support her until they had the knife ready. It took months for her empire to crumble, but only one headline confirmed it. CEO Isla Rahim loses everything in 48 hours. Banks froze accounts. Competitors celebrated. Partners backed out. Suddenly, the woman who once commanded a floor full of executives found herself sitting alone at our kitchen table, staring at documents that smelled of betrayal more than bankruptcy. That night, she didn't cry, not because she was strong, but because she was exhausted. She stared at her trembling hands, as though they belonged to someone else. "I'm ruined," she whispered, voice thin and brittle. "Everyone will think I've dragged you down with me. They'll think you married wrong." I sat beside her, but she didn't look at me, as if afraid she might see disappointment in my eyes. She didn't know the truth, that the sight of her breaking hurt me more than any financial collapse ever could. I reached for her hand, but she pulled it away gently, saying, "You don't have to stay when things turn ugly. People like you run when the lights go out." Maybe she meant it as self-protection. Maybe she meant it because years of being admired had never taught her how to be loved. But her words were knives, not because they were unfair, but because she believed them. And outside our window, the world mirrored her fears. Reporters gathered like vultures. Social media called me the fool who would regret tying himself to a sinking ship. Rumors spread that I had already taken money under her name, that I'd leave the country next, that I was only waiting for the right moment to escape. I could almost hear the mocking voices. A playboy never stays when the party ends. But what they didn't know, what even Isla didn't know, was that I had been preparing for a storm long before it arrived. That my so-called carefree life had quietly built connections, networks, allies who didn't measure worth in headlines. That I had gathered resources, ideas, and silent power while the world wasn't watching. They thought losing her company meant losing everything. They didn't know she was the only thing I never planned to lose. And I wasn't just staying. I had a bigger plan, one that would rebuild everything she lost and reveal who I truly was. The morning after her collapse felt strangely quiet, as if the world itself held its breath, waiting to see how far she would fall. Isla moved through the house like a shadow that hadn't fully returned to its body. Her confidence, once sharp enough to slice through doubt, had dulled overnight. She made coffee but forgot to drink it. She sat at her desk but never opened the laptop. And when her phone buzzed with messages from former colleagues pretending to offer sympathy, she turned it face down without reading a single one. For the first time since I met her, she was afraid to check her email, as though each new notification carried another piece of bad news ready to crush whatever remained of her spirit. I watched her from across the room, not as a helpless spectator, but as a man memorizing every detail of a war his wife had been forced into without armor. People assumed losing money was the worst part. They didn't understand that for Isla, it wasn't the finances that broke her. It was the betrayal. The partners she had fought for, the employees she had protected, the investors she had saved from disastrous decisions, half of them disappeared the moment her shine dimmed. The other half sharpened their teeth. She had spent years building an empire based on loyalty, transparency, and grit. But the business world wasn't a place of gratitude. It was a quiet battlefield where even victories came wrapped in knives. And now, with her company gone, Isla felt like the world had just confirmed her darkest fear, that she was only valued when she was useful. That afternoon, she tried to call an old mentor for advice, someone she once trusted more than her own board. The call went unanswered. She tried again, nothing. When she finally gave up, she lowered her phone slowly, as if putting down something fragile. Her eyes didn't fill with tears. Instead, they emptied, hollow and betrayed. I had seen her furious, determined, exhausted, but never defeated. And seeing her like that carved something in my chest I didn't know could hurt. So I walked to her, sat on the floor beside her chair, and rested my head gently on her knee like a silent vow. She looked down at me with sadness that didn't belong on her face. "You didn't sign up for this," she whispered. "You deserve someone who isn't falling apart." But she didn't understand. I had never chosen her for the version of her the world worshipped. I chose her for the version who laughed too hard at midnight, who forgot to eat breakfast, who apologized to plants when she accidentally brushed them too roughly, who held her success with humility because she remembered what it cost her. People saw her power. I saw her softness. People admired her strength. I loved her honesty. Staying wasn't a burden. It was the only thing that made sense. Yet I knew that words wouldn't convince her. Not now. Not while her world was collapsing one pillar at a time. So I didn't say anything. I just held her hand until she finally stopped trying to pull it away. Later that evening, the news channels ran stories about her downfall, using dramatic phrases like corporate tragedy, sudden crash, unexpected failure. Some analysts speculated that her marriage played a role. One even suggested that a man with her husband's reputation must have been a distraction. I laughed at the ridiculousness of it, but Isla flinched, as if the words had found the weakest part of her armor and pierced through. She turned off the TV, folded her arms around herself, and said softly, "They'll blame you because they can't blame me anymore." There was a vulnerability in her tone that felt heavier than any accusation from the outside world. What she didn't know was that while she was breaking, I had already set certain things in motion. For months, I'd been quietly preparing, observing, collecting information, studying the fractures within her company that she was too busy to notice. I knew which partners were loyal and which were opportunistic. I knew which suppliers were planning to jump ship. I knew which competitors were circling her market like sharks waiting for blood. And I knew exactly who had orchestrated the sabotage disguised as business coincidences. Isla believed she fell because she wasn't careful enough. But I knew someone had pushed her. The world had always assumed I was too shallow to understand business, too distracted to pay attention, too irresponsible to act with intention. That was fine. Their underestimation had always been my greatest advantage. I liked being the man no one took seriously. It gave me space to observe without being noticed, to prepare without being questioned. And now, as Isla sat in front of me drowning in self-blame, I realized this was a moment that all those years of being underestimated would finally serve a purpose. Because, while everyone expected me to run, I was planning to fight. Not recklessly, not loudly, but strategically, silently, and effectively. I wasn't just staying by her side. I was already building a path back to everything she lost, starting with the truth behind her downfall. And when I finally revealed the plan I'd been crafting in the shadows, the world would understand something it had never bothered to learn about me. Playboys don't run. Strategists wait. The next day, Isla tried pretending she was fine, the way strong people do when they think breaking is a luxury they can't afford. She woke early, tied her hair back with trembling fingers, and sat at the dining table with a notebook she didn't write a single word in. She kept telling herself she needed to plan the next step. But every time she uncapped her pen, her hand hovered above the page as if she had forgotten how planning even worked. People often assume that when someone powerful falls, they immediately rise again with fire in their eyes and a vow to reclaim everything. But real life isn't a movie. Sometimes when a strong person collapses, the first thing they lose is their certainty, not their courage. And Isla, my brilliant, unstoppable Isla, was drowning in uncertainty. I watched her for hours, pretending to read a book on the couch. She thought I was giving her space, but really, I was studying the way she blinked too slowly, the way she inhaled deeply before answering even the simplest question, the way her whole body seemed exhausted from carrying a weight she never expected to bear. She wasn't just dealing with a financial crisis. She was dealing with betrayal that rewired her sense of trust. And betrayal doesn't just break the heart, it breaks the logic of the world. When afternoon came, she finally closed a notebook and whispered, "Maybe they were right about me." Her voice was so soft, I almost missed it. I looked up, startled. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. She stared straight ahead, her expression distant. "Everyone. The board. The investors. The people who said I was too young, too ambitious, too certain I could keep control." She swallowed hard. Maybe they were just waiting for proof that I wasn't meant to lead. Her words hit me like a punch, not because she was wrong, but because she believed she was. I sat beside her, gently pulling the notebook from her hands. "You didn't fail," I said quietly. "You were targeted." She flinched, as if the word itself was too dangerous to accept. "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "That makes it sound personal. Business isn't personal." "That's the lie they tell you," I replied. "Business is always personal when people envy your power." She looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time since her downfall. There was confusion in her eyes, maybe even a hint of fear, as if she sensed I knew something she didn't. "Why do you say it like that?" she asked. "Because I had proof. Because I had been quietly following the trail of her collapse long before it became public. Because I had seen the cracks forming in her company's structure, while she was too busy fighting on the front lines to check the walls behind her. But I couldn't tell her, not yet, not while she was this fragile, not while the ground beneath her was still shaking. A truth delivered at the wrong time can break a person more than a lie ever did. So instead of revealing everything, I placed her hand in mine and said, "Because someone wanted you to fall, and I'm not going to let them win." Her gaze softened, but only for a moment. She pulled her hand back gently and whispered, "I don't have anything left to fight with." That's when I realized she didn't need a plan right now. She needed a pause. She needed stillness so her mind could breathe, so her heart could settle, so her soul could remember its own strength. But the world outside wouldn't give her that. Reporters continued to call. Former colleagues kept sending hollow messages. Opportunistic business rivals lurked like wolves, waiting for the right moment to tear apart whatever reputation she had left. So I made a decision. If the world wouldn't give her peace, I would create it. I reached for her notebook and tore a page from the back, writing something quickly. Then I slid it across the table. She frowned. Picking it up, "What's this?" "A deal," I said. The note had only 12 words. "Give me 1 week. No questions. Trust me once, and I'll fix everything." For a long moment, she didn't speak. The house felt too quiet, like the air itself was waiting for her answer. She looked at me with hesitation, with exhaustion, with love buried beneath layers of fear. "You're asking for blind trust," she said softly. "No," I corrected gently. "I'm asking for borrowed trust. I will earn the rest." Her eyes glistened, not with hope, but with the fear of hoping again. But something inside her shifted, something small but real. She folded the paper, held it tightly, and whispered, 1 week. She didn't know that the moment she agreed, a silent countdown started, not to her failure, but to my plan's awakening. Because the world had taken her empire, now it was my turn to take something back. The moment Isla whispered 1 week, something electric shifted in the air, quiet, almost invisible, but powerful enough to change the direction of everything that came after. She didn't realize it, but in that moment she handed me permission not just to act, but to become the person I had been preparing to be for years. She thought she was giving me temporary trust. She didn't know she was unlocking a version of me she had never truly seen. A strategist, a fighter, a man who didn't need a title to wield influence. The world had spent so long dismissing me as a playboy that it never noticed a network I had built in the shadows. Quiet alliances formed in odd corners of the city. Favors exchanged without signatures. Conversations that sounded casual but were anything but. And now, every one of those threads would be pulled. Not for my sake. For hers. The first step was simple. Disappearance. Not ours, but hers from the noise. I needed her away from the cameras, the rumors, the vultures circling the ruins of her company. So the next morning, before dawn had even brushed the windows, I packed her a small bag and nudged her awake gently. She blinked at me, confused. "Where are we going?" she murmured. "Somewhere quiet," I said. She didn't question it. Not that day. She was too tired to fight, too worn down to resist. So she let me guide her to the car, her movements slow, her eyes half-focused. We drove for an hour, leaving behind the glass towers and suffocating expectations. The city dissolved into open roads, then into hills dusted with morning haze. It wasn't until we reached a small lakeside cottage, an old place I had bought years ago and never told anyone about, that her expression shifted. "This is yours," she whispered. I nodded. "Always has been. I just never needed it before." She looked at the cottage again, her surprise softening into something fragile and warm. For the first time in days, her shoulders dropped, not in defeat, but in relief. Inside, the cottage smelled of cedar and old memories, quiet and untouched. Isla wandered through the room slowly, touching the shelves, the window frames, the soft, worn sofa. "Why did you keep this a secret?" she asked. I hesitated. "Because some places are meant to stay untouched until the right person needs them." She didn't reply, but her eyes said enough. She understood. I spent the next few hours settling her in, cooking breakfast, airing out the rooms, lighting the old fireplace. Isla watched me with confusion that bordered on disbelief. She wasn't used to being taken care of. Her life had trained her to carry everything alone, to lead, to survive, to endure. But here, in this quiet refuge, she didn't have to be so Isla Rahim. She could just be a woman who needed rest. I didn't ask her to talk. I didn't ask her to plan. I simply made space for her to breathe. As she sat on the porch overlooking the lake, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the still water, I stepped away and made my first call. It rang only once. "It's time," I said. A low chuckle answered. "Thought you'd never say it." The voice belonged to Rehan, a man the world mistook for a bartender, but who actually ran the most extensive information chain in the city. A friend, a brother, almost. Someone who owed me a favor from a night I never talk about. "Send me everything," I said. "Board movements, investor shifts, communications from the last 6 months, and find out who met with her competitors before the collapse." "You're going after them?" he asked. "No," I replied. "Not yet. First, I need to see the whole chessboard." Next, I called Celine, a lawyer with a reputation for pulling apart corporate lies like threads. She owed me more than one favor, and she didn't bother pretending otherwise. "I heard about Isla," she said. "Tragic, but expected. They've been circling her for months." I stiffened. "You knew?" "Everyone who watches the market knew," she replied. "But you were the only one I expected to do something about it." Her confidence wasn't flattery. It was recognition. She knew I didn't play games unless I planned to win them. By evening, after hours of calls, messages, encrypted transfers, and quiet movements across the city, I returned to the porch. Isla was still there, watching the sunset fold into water. She looked calmer, but tired, empty by days of fighting invisible battles. I sat beside her, without a word. After a long silence, she whispered, "Are you sure you want to use your week on me?" I turned to her gently. "No," I said, "I'm going to use it for you." She closed her eyes, as if absorbing the words slowly. She didn't know that while she sat healing by the lake, the quiet war I had been preparing for years was finally beginning. She didn't know how many people were already moving under my command, how many doors were opening because of calls made in my name. She didn't know that the man she thought the world misjudged was about to show just how dangerous being underestimated could become. While Isla rested at the cottage, her world quiet for the first time in years. The city stirred beneath the surface like a beast sensing disturbance. My calls had rippled through networks people didn't even know existed, reaching corners where whispers traveled faster than news channels. By the second morning, I had reports arriving from 3 different sources, each carrying a piece of the truth behind her downfall. And as each piece fell into my hands, the picture sharpened. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't poor management or miscalculations. It was a coordinated takedown, precise, deliberate, and fueled by someone with a motive deep enough to risk everything. But that wasn't the surprising part. The surprising part was how close the betrayer had been. Back at the cottage, Isla was sitting by the fireplace, wrapped in a wool blanket, her hair tied loosely, her eyes distant. She looked nothing like the CEO the world knew, nothing like the woman who once commanded boardrooms with her presence alone. Yet, in this fragile version of her, there was a quiet beauty, a softness the world rarely earned from her. When she saw me walk in, she tried to stand, but exhaustion weighed her down. "You've been out early the last 2 mornings," she said. "Where do you go?" I smiled lightly, "Just making sure no one follows us." Her lips parted, worry flickering in her eyes. "Is that really necessary?" "Yes," I said simply. And the truth was, it absolutely was. The same people who orchestrated her fall would love nothing more than to see her broken, alone, and defeated. The moment she showed signs of recovery, even emotional recovery, they would strike again. People who aimed to destroy rarely stopped after the first blow. I sat beside her, handing her a hot mug of tea. She took it with both hands, staring at the steam rising from it. "You're doing too much," she whispered. "I don't want you to burn yourself because of me." I almost laughed at the irony, because she didn't know just how long I'd been preparing for this moment, long before a world ever began to crack. "I'm not burning myself," I said softly. "I'm finally using the fire for something that matters." She didn't reply, but her eyes softened with unsaid gratitude. That was enough for now. Later, when she went to shower, I finally opened the folder that had arrived through Rayhan's courier service, hand-delivered, untraceable. The first page alone made my blood go cold. It was an email between 2 board members, people Isla trusted, dated 3 months before her collapse. Their words were sharp, strategic, dripping with envy and calculation. They discussed her weaknesses, her vulnerabilities, her emotional exhaustion, her declining trust in certain advisors. They spoke of waiting for the perfect moment when her focus slipped. They spoke of shifting investors behind her back. They spoke of grooming someone else to take over her position. And worst of all, they spoke of her downfall as if it were a chess move, inevitable, mechanical, almost boring. My jaw tightened. I flipped through the next pages. Financial inconsistencies planted under her name, misleading presentations altered at the last minute, investors approached quietly by her so-called allies. And then I found the final blow. A confidential contract signed by one of her main competitors with one of her own board members. A deal worth millions, sealed weeks before her accidental collapse. It wasn't sabotage. It was treason. When I stepped outside for air, the cold wind bit against my skin, grounding me in the reality of what needed to be done. I wasn't fighting for pride. I wasn't fighting for revenge. I was fighting for justice, for truth. And justice is only justice if done in silence, precision, and control. As I stood under the fading afternoon light, my phone buzzed. It was Celine. "I've traced the root signatures on the falsified documents," she said. Someone intentionally rerouted approvals under Isla's name. She didn't sign a single thing that led to the company's collapse. My grip tightened. Can you prove it? Give me 3 days, she replied, and I can bring down half the board. 3 days. 3 days was perfect, because I still had 4 days left on Isla's 1 week promise. When I returned to the cottage, Isla was sitting on the floor with her back against the sofa, her hair wet, her skin warm from the shower. She looked up at me with that fragile confusion again. You're thinking about something, she said. I knelt down beside her. I'm thinking, I whispered, about how close you were being saved and how close they were being exposed. She frowned, not understanding. Good. She wasn't supposed to understand yet. Not until the moment I needed her to, because when the truth came out, I wanted her to face it standing tall, not broken on the floor. And by the time she saw the full picture, the world that betrayed her would already be burning behind us. The next morning, Isla woke earlier than usual. Not with energy, not yet, but with a kind of quiet clarity that comes after a long storm, when the heart is tired of breaking and finally chooses stillness. She walked out onto the porch wrapped in a beige shawl, her bare feet cold against the wooden planks, her hair falling loose down her back. She looked at the lake as if it were a mirror she wasn't ready to face. When she heard my footsteps behind her, she didn't turn around. I had a dream, she said softly. I saw myself standing in front of my old office, but the door wouldn't open, no matter what I did. I stepped closer, careful not to break the delicate quiet around us. Maybe it wasn't your office anymore, I suggested. She finally turned. Her eyes were tired but deeper now, searching. Then whose was it? Whoever took it from you. The words lingered in the cold morning air, heavier than they sounded. Her brows tightened. You keep saying things like that, like someone purposely wanted me gone. She swallowed, her voice cracking slightly. I need you to be honest with me. Am I being paranoid, or do you know something I don't? This was the most dangerous moment, the fragile point between truth and timing. If I told her everything now, she would spiral, blame herself, lose what little strength she had regained. But if I lied, she would lose trust in me, and trust was the only currency I needed from her. So I walked until I stood in front of her, close enough for her to feel the steadiness in my voice. Isla, I said gently, you didn't fall because you were weak. You fell because someone pushed you. Her breath hitched. Her eyes widened, not with denial, but with recognition. A part of her had always suspected it. That's why the truth didn't shock her. It validated her deepest fear. She sat down slowly on the porch bench, gripping the edge of the wooden railing as though the world had tilted. Who? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Who did this to me? I sat beside her, placing my hand over hers, not to calm her, but to anchor her. Not yet, I said softly. You're not ready for names. Her jaw tightened. She hated feeling powerless. She hated not knowing. I have the right to know, she snapped. But her voice trembled, betraying the pain beneath the anger. You do, I replied, calm and steady. And you'll know soon. I promise. The word promise made her still. She looked at me long, searching my face for any sign of uncertainty. She found none, and slowly, painfully, she allowed herself to breathe again. After a long silence, she whispered, Why are you doing all this? The question startled me, not because I didn't expect it, but because she asked it so sincerely, as if she genuinely believed she wasn't worth the effort, as if she thought I was doing her a favor instead of fulfilling a responsibility woven into my bones. Because you're my wife, I said softly, and because you spent years being strong for everyone else. It's my turn to be strong for you. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears back, refusing to let them fall. That tiny act of defiance made my heart clench. Isla had always fought alone. She didn't know how to lean on someone, not even me. But now she was trying, and that was enough. Around noon, she fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from emotions she never allowed herself to feel. I covered her with a blanket and quietly stepped outside to make another call. This time, it was to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Someone whose expertise didn't live in boardrooms or courtrooms, but in the shadows between them. A man named Sire, who could track digital footprints the same way a hunter followed scent trails. "You're late," he said as soon as he picked up. "I expected your call the moment she fell." "I needed her safe first," I replied. "Now I need the full trail. Emails, messages, deleted logs, encrypted exchanges, everything." "Who am I looking at?" he asked. "Start with her board," I said. "Two of them, specifically. And cross-check with her competitors' leadership teams." He let out a low whistle. "You're going big." "I'm going precise." He chuckled. "You always were." By the time I hung up, the sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the wooden porch. I looked inside through the glass door. Isla lay curled on the couch, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, breathing softly. For the first time in days, she looked almost peaceful. This moment of fragile peace was the reason I couldn't tell her everything yet. The truth I was uncovering wasn't just dangerous. It was devastating. It would break her, then rebuild her, but only if the timing was right. And I was determined to control that timing. Because while the world believed she had already lost, I knew better. She hadn't even begun to rise yet. And when she did, the people who betrayed her wouldn't know how to survive her return. Isla woke just before sunset, and for a moment she didn't seem to recognize where she was. Her gaze lingered on the ceiling, then drifted to the window where the orange light spilled across the floor like liquid fire. When her eyes met mine, something in her expression softened. Not relief exactly, but quiet resignation that comes when someone is finally done running from themselves. She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders, her voice rough from sleep. "I remember something," she said. "From a night everything fell apart." I moved closer, not interrupting, not encouraging, just creating space for the truth she was finally ready to touch. She rubbed her forehead, as if trying to push through the fog in her memory. "There was an email," she whispered. "A warning. Someone told me not to attend that meeting. Someone I trusted." My breath stilled. That detail hadn't appeared in any reports or logs I'd reviewed, which meant the email had been deleted carefully, deliberately. She frowned as the memory sharpened. "I thought it was a mistake. Or maybe they were just worried for me. I didn't want to believe it." "That's because you don't think like them," I said quietly. "You think loyalty means something." Her throat worked as she swallowed, and they use it against me. I nodded, slowly, gently, confirming without overwhelming. She looked down at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. "Tell me everything," she said finally. Her voice didn't shake this time. It was steady, resolved. "I'm ready." I sat beside her, close but not touching. "Isla, the people who tried to push you out weren't your rivals. They weren't strangers. They were people you built your company with, people you trusted." Her breath hitched, but she didn't look away. "Names," she whispered. "Say their names." I exhaled slowly. There was no protecting her from the truth now, not when she was demanding it with this much quiet strength. "Ria." And Xavian. Her entire body went still. Not a tremble, not a gasp, just a complete, consuming stillness. The kind that happens when the ground finally opens beneath your feet, and you decide not to fall with it. "Ria," she repeated, barely audible. She was like a sister to me. "She was also the one who leaked your internal reports," I said. "She sabotaged the funding pitch. She fed your competitors' data. Every major hit you took in the past 2 years, traced back to her." A single tear slid down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. She let it fall, let it exist, let it mean something. "And Xavian," she asked, "he orchestrated the vote. He wanted your position. He convinced the board you were unstable, overworked, emotionally compromised. He told them you were a liability." Her jaw clenched, not in pain, but in focus. Calculation. Awareness. I had seen this version of Isla before. The strategist, the leader, the woman who built an empire out of sleepless nights and stubborn resilience. She wasn't breaking. She was waking. After long silence, she finally spoke. Why? The word was so small, but the ache in it was enormous. Because you were too good, I answered simply. Too sharp, too principled. People like you make people like them feel small. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, the sadness was still there. But beneath it, something new was forming. Something hard, something bright, something dangerous. What happens now? She asked. You decide, I said. I'll stand with whatever choice you make. She took a deep breath, grounding herself. I want my company back. The way she said it, low, steady, without a hint of hesitation, sent a chill through me. Not fear, pride, recognition. And I want them to face what they did, she added. Not with revenge, with consequences. I nodded. Then I'll handle the logistics. Sahir will finish the digital trail. We'll build the case piece by piece. She looked at me then, truly looked, past the walls, past the pain, past the exhaustion. Thank you, she whispered, not for saving me, but for waiting for me to save myself. I reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, turning the lake into a sheet of molten gold. The world was quiet, not empty, not broken, just waiting. And for the first time in a long time, Isla wasn't running from the darkness. She was preparing to walk back into it. With her head high, her voice steady, and her truth sharp enough to cut through anything that dared to stand in her way. And as I stood beside her, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her story wasn't ending. It was just beginning.